Thank you, Shravan. Now for our introductions. Representing California's 17th District, Congressman Ro Khanna carries a profound legacy of public service and civic sacrifice. As the grandson of Indian freedom fighters and son of immigrants, he has dedicated his career to the pursuit of justice and a vision of economic patriotism, turning a country defined by scarcity into one of true opportunity. Prior to Congress, Representative Khanna taught at Stanford as a visiting lecturer of economics. Welcome back, Professor Khanna. Now joining him is Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator Sanders is the longest serving independent member of Congress. Guys, I have a couple more sentences. I still remember trying to mobilize my fellow middle schoolers for his 2020 presidential campaign. I bring up this memory not to make Senator Sanders or myself feel old, when in reality, as you can see, we're equally youthful in spirit. Instead, it is a testament to the organizers, activists, and public servants that Senator Sanders has inspired through his moral consistency and clarity. Congressman, Senator, thank you both for teaching us that there is a better way to do politics. It is a lesson we need now more than ever. Following the remarks, we will open the first floor to a Q&A for our students, moderated by student Diya TV. I don't need to say this, but please give a warm welcome to Senator Bernie Sanders and Congressman Ro Khanna.
Sorry to step on your introduction. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert, and I'm sorry. I am sorry, Robert, that I stepped on your introduction. I thought it was very short, and it came out and wasn't. Let me thank everybody. This is a great turnout. We appreciate very much you being here. And let me thank Ro Khanna for joining me. I hope all of you know that in Ro, you have one of the bravest, most effective members in the U.S. House, and I thank you very much for electing him. And I wish that we could be here at happier times. But I would not be honest if I didn't tell you what you already know, that we are living in so many ways in an extremely stressful moment, and in many ways, the most dangerous moment in the modern history of this country. And I really wish that my generation, Ro's generation, could have given you a world that was easier and better than the one you are facing. but like generations before you, throughout the history of our country, whether it was the civil rights movement or the people who went before them, the great labor leaders in this country, the women leaders in this country, gay leaders in this country, I am absolutely confident that your generation, in these very difficult times, when we're taking on authoritarianism, when we're taking on oligarchy, when we have an extremely unstable president of the United States, I have little doubt that your generation is going to rise to the occasion and make America proud. So thank you all for what you're doing. This is one of the great universities in America. You are very big into technology, so I know that you know that artificial intelligence and robotics is in the process of transforming the world. We are at the beginning of the most profound technological revolution in world history, a revolution which will bring unimaginable changes to our country and the entire world. These changes will impact our economy. They will threaten our democratic institutions. They will impact our emotional well-being and how we relate to each other as human beings. They will impact how we educate and raise our kids. They will impact foreign policy and the nature of warfare. Further, and frighteningly, as many of you are aware, there are some extremely knowledgeable people in the AI world who feel that what was once seen as science fiction could actually become a reality. And that is that super intelligent AI could become smarter than humans. But sometimes when we think of that, that's not a very high bar. But nonetheless, could become smarter than humans, could become independent of human control, and could pose an existential threat to the human race. In other words, human beings could actually lose control over the planet Earth. AI and robotics are creating the most sweeping technological revolution in the history of humanity, and the scale, scope, and speed of that change is unprecedented. That is not just Bernie Sanders talking. According to Dimas Hassabis, the head of Google's DeepMind, the AI revolution will be 10 times bigger than the industrial revolution and 10 times faster. In other words, this technological revolution will have 100 times the impact that the industrial revolution had. As we speak, AI companies are making their models smarter and smarter. Every day there is another breakthrough. According to the Model Evaluation and Threat Research Group, the length of tasks AI can complete is doubling roughly every 7 months, doubling. And it's not just what the AI companies are saying. Take a look at what they are doing. This year, 4 AI companies are spending $670 billion to build out data centers. As a percentage of GDP, that is 10 times greater than what we spent each year on the moon landing. Bottom line, we are looking at the most significant investment in human history, which is bringing about the most rapid societal transformation in human history. That is what we are looking at right now. So, given that reality of the enormous changes that are taking place and will impact every person in this room, our country, and the world, here is the question that we should be asking day after day, but unfortunately we are not. And that question is, who is pushing this revolution? Who benefits from it? And who gets hurt? The bottom line, to my mind, is AI and robotics are neither good nor bad. The question is, will a handful of billionaires benefit from it, or will the general public benefit it? That is the debate that we have got to undertake. In my view, and as I think all of you know, at a time in American history when we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had, the AI revolution is being pushed by the very, very wealthiest people in our country, including folks like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, and Peter Thiel, and others. But a small number of multi-billionaires are investing huge sums of money in AI and robotics. And the question that we've got to ask ourselves is, why are they doing this? Are they doing it because they want to improve the standard of living of the 60% of our people who today in America are living paycheck to paycheck? Many of your families are struggling to pay for health care, pay for housing, pay for the cost of your education, pay for groceries. Stop for a moment and think, is that what Mr. Musk and Mr. Bezos are thinking about as they generate this extraordinary revolution? Well, some people may think that is the case. I know those guys. I don't believe it. I think the answer is fairly obvious. The richest people in this country are investing in AI and robotics because those investments will increase their wealth and power exponentially. In other words, the richest and most powerful people on earth will become even richer and more powerful. But what happens to working people, ordinary Americans, during this transition? And the truth is, nobody knows for sure. But what some very knowledgeable people are saying is that the AI and robotics being developed by these multi-billionaires today will allow corporate America to wipe out tens of millions of good-paying jobs, cut labor costs, and boost profits for the corporate world. Elon Musk, who has invested hundreds of billions in AI and robotics, recently said that, quote, AI and robots will replace all jobs. Working will be optional, end of quote. Bill Gates, multi-billionaire, founder of Microsoft, who has also made huge investments in these technologies, predicted that humans, quote, won't be needed for most things, end of quote. Mustafa Suleyman, the CEO of Microsoft AI, said most white-collar work, quote, will be fully automated by an AI within the next 12 to 18 months, end of quote. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei wrote that recent breakthroughs had made it clear that we are only a few years away from the point when, quote, AI is better than humans at essentially everything, end quote. Now, are these guys right? Are they hyping it? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. But these are smart guys who have made huge investments in AI and robotics, and we should listen carefully to what they are saying. But it's not just what they're saying. They're beginning to do it. Jeff Bezos, the fifth wealthiest person in the world, worth about $230 billion, has reportedly pushed his staff for years to think big and envision what it would take Amazon, he owns Amazon, to fully automate its operations. Bezos plans, this is no great secret, to replace at least 600,000 workers at Amazon with robots. And that's just one company. According to Mr. Amodai, the head of Anthropic, AI, quote, isn't a substitute for specific human jobs, but rather a general labor substitute for humans. According to OpenAI's charter, its mission is to build, quote, highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. In other words, what these guys are doing is building a technology that will replace, in many, many instances, and again, nobody knows exactly how, why, when, and where, but it will replace human labor. And the people who are investing will become much richer. The corporations who own that technology, who buy the robots, who use AI, are going to do very, very well in addition. So if you are, for example, an owner of a factory, why do you want to pay a worker a decent wage, have to worry about benefits, have to worry about the worker becoming sick, when for $20,000 or $30,000, you can buy a robot that works 24 hours a day. No sick time, no union issues, just got a robot who works all of the time. As the ranking member of the U.S. Senate Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, I released a report finding that AI, automation, and robotics could replace nearly 100 million jobs in America over the next decade, including 47% of truck drivers, 64% of accountants, and 89% of fast food workers, among many, many other occupations. We are already starting to see the impact of AI on workers and especially young people. Researchers right here at Stanford released a paper in November called Canaries in the Coal Mine that found that there has already been a 16% relative decline in employment for younger workers in jobs exposed to AI, like computer programming and customer service. In other words, it is already more difficult for young college graduates to find decent jobs. So, what will happen to those people? Will they be able to find new jobs? Now, there are some people who say, well, Bernie, you're overstating the issue. There's always been changes in technology. We don't have too many horse and buggy drivers. We don't have too many blacksmiths. Things come and go. People lose their jobs and people gain new jobs. And there's truth to that. But there are very, very smart people who are saying this is not like the past. The speed and the degree to which this technological change is going to take place far, far surpasses anything that we have ever seen in the past. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, and I think what motivated me to get involved in this issue, is my belief, and Ro can speak to this as well, that the Congress and the American people are very unprepared for the tsunami that is coming. All right? So if millions of people lose their jobs and can't simply go to another job because that other job has also disappeared, what do? And somebody says, well, no problem, we'll just give, basic a check to everybody. Really? Who's going to write that check? And when people lose their jobs, how are you going to maintain institutions like Medicare and Social Security when people are not paying taxes? And if they're going to simply write out checks, how much are you getting? And how much are you getting? And how guaranteed are you? Is it Mr. Musk who's going to be writing out a check? So these are questions that we have not in any serious way, Ro can agree with me or not, begun discussing in the Congress. Some people can have differences of opinion. Maybe they think I'm wrong in my analysis, but at least we got to lay this on the table. That's why I'm here today. And my own view is that we have got to slow this thing down. And I know people say it's impossible. It's moving too fast. You can't. But I think you do. And I think we need to take a deep breath and say, all right, my God, if all of these jobs are going to disappear, what in God's name, what kind of world are we creating? How do we protect the average American worker? And that is why I think that we need a moratorium on the growth of data centers in this country. Okay. So bottom line, I know it's easy to criticize me. Things are moving fast and we got China and all this other stuff. But I think we have not a clue about the revolution that is taking place now. And we got to think our way through this. Again, AI, in my view, not good. A lot of good things about AI, not bad. It's how we utilize it. So if somebody tells me, well, Bernie, you know, they're going to increase worker productivity in a factory, and that means that instead of working 40 or 50 hours a week, that worker is going to work 20 hours a week and make the same or maybe even more money. Is that a bad thing? No, that's a good thing. But if those workers are simply thrown out on the street in order to make Mr. Musk and his friends even richer, is that a good thing? No, it is not. If AI can develop prescription drugs which cure illnesses, is that a bad thing? No, it's a great thing. And there's a lot of evidence that AI can help us in healthcare in a whole lot of ways. Again, the bottom line is not whether it's good, the technology is good or bad, it is how we utilize it and who benefits from it. But it's not just economics which concerns me and what happens to working people. It is no great secret that in this country we have a mental health crisis. And COVID only made a bad situation even worse for all the young people in this room. Your education was disrupted by COVID. Your relationships with your friends was disrupted by COVID. And one of the questions we have to ask ourselves, if AI is going to replace a lot of the work that human beings do, what becomes of human beings? Are we superfluous in the process? What happens to our ability to relate to each other? Right now, there are millions and millions of young people who are getting their companionship not from each other, but from social media and ChatGPT and the other technologies. In fact, just last week, there was on Valentine's Day in Washington, D.C., a cafe had a dinner for people and their AI buddies. And we laugh at that, but the truth is that a lot of people are becoming dependent upon AI for their emotional support. And what is the long-term impact of that? What is the long-term impact if we lose work as an important part of our lives? What do we do with our lives? Now, there are a lot of answers, and people can debate it, but that's the issue that we have got to begin debating. The last point that I want to make is, since I've been in California for the last couple of days, I'm meeting a lot of people who know a lot more about this subject than I do. And there is a fear in some parts of the industry that it is possible that within a few years, AI will become smarter than human beings, and that AI will disobey the people who control that technology. And, you know, various doomsday scenarios have been laid out, but apparently this is no longer a science fiction story, but something that people fear very much. But despite those fears, you're having these companies going ahead very, very rapidly, discarding a lot of the concerns that safety experts have. So there is an enormous amount to be thinking about here. I've just covered a small part of discussion. I mean, in terms of democracy, the future of democracy. There is technology right now out there where you will have people, you will have a phone call coming to somebody in this district, and that phone call will have AI researched information knowing all about the individual who's going to pick up the phone, what their views are, and telling them why Rose should not be reelected. All right? It's not just don't vote for him or don't vote for Bernie Sanders. We know all about you. We know you're concerned about the environment. Did you know? Right now, there are things many of you are aware of, deep fakes, where there are people who look like me and others. I've been a victim of it, where it's not just patching together words that you say. They have an algorithm of your words, and they can make you look like you're saying something that you are not saying. Well, how does democracy survive all of that? And again, I think Congress has been in no way prepared to address that issue as well. So what I hope is that we'll, in a few minutes, hear from you, but now let me introduce somebody who really is an outstanding member of the Congress, who has been a fighter for working people and for democracy, who is one of the leaders in making sure that the Epstein files became available to all. Khanna.
Well, let me, that was excellent. Look, it is a historic moment to have Senator Bernie Sanders here at Stanford, who has done more to tackle inequality of income and wealth than any politician in my lifetime. And being here with a lot of young, brilliant Stanford students is a reminder that I've had a pretty long lifetime, nearly 50 years. So that is a statement. I also want to recognize Dr. Jane Sanders, if you would stand up, who has done a lot of this work with Senator Sanders. It's an incredible honor, and it shows the seriousness with which the senator considers this topic that Jane also came here. Thank you, Jane, for being here. Bernie Sanders has also thought more deeply about AI and its impact on the working class than anyone in the United States Senate. And that's what we're here today to discuss, these two defining issues, inequality and AI, and the relationship between the two. We live in a new Gilded Age. Tech billionaires, believing that they would have been heroic conquerors in a different era, are wresting control of our economy, our media, and our politics. That's just not my observation. That's what they tell me. We would have been conquerors if we had lived at a different time. Musk, Thiel, Ellison believe they have a modern divine right to lead and rule. Most Americans feel they have little say in shaping their future. And this in part has contributed to the anger, resentment, and hopeless cynicism in places across our country. A nation cannot survive with islands of prosperity and seas of despair. Professor Gabriel Zucman, and some of you may have read him in your class, has shown that today's wealth concentration is at the highest it has ever been in our nation's history, far higher than when I was teaching here just 10 years ago. Listen to this, about 19 billionaires have $3.4 trillion, the equivalent of 12.5% of all the goods and services that are produced in the United States. This is nearly 3 times more than the wealthiest Americans were worth relative to the size of the economy in the Gilded Age. 3 times as much wealth concentration today. Extreme wealth often forms an unholy alliance with power to strip us of equal voice and to have 2 tiers of justice. And that's really what the Epstein class was. 2 tiers of justice, rich and powerful people who felt they were above the law and didn't have to live by the rest of the norms and laws of civilized society. We meet today at the epicenter of this wealth concentration and AI innovation. This 50-mile radius around my district includes Stanford, Apple, Google, NVIDIA, Broadcom, and Tesla, is worth over $18 trillion. We met with some of these companies earlier today. Think about that. 1/3 of the entire nation's stock market is in this district. 1/3. Now, we see the future from here. We know what's coming in a way that many politicians and DC bureaucrats simply can't see. But the question, as Senator Sanders put it, and I put it similarly, is what kind of future are we going to build? Will this future be only for the tech lords, for the tech billionaires, or will it be for all of us? Today, I call for a new tech social contract. You know, they used to say, to whom much is given, much is expected. I have a modification. To whom much is given, at least a little is expected. The truth is, our taxpayers and our philanthropic dollars funded the development of AI at Dartmouth, MIT, and here at Stanford with ImageNet and with the Digital Library Project that helped birth Google. Now let's acknowledge, tech entrepreneurs have taken risks. They work hard. They show skill and imagination in scaling and adopting the technology. One person was saying, Roe doesn't believe in innovation and hard work. Of course I believe in innovation and hard work. But you know what else I know? Because I've studied history, just like every other successful generation of American entrepreneurs over the past 2 centuries, they stand on the foundation of public investment. That is why we must ask not what America can do for Silicon Valley, but what Silicon Valley must do for America. The AI revolution can help cure cancer, rare disease, slash housing costs, make it easier to start a business, address our energy needs, and lower medical and educational costs for the working class. You heard Senator Sanders say the same thing. We're not Luddites in the way that it's used. I don't want to get into the explanation that the Luddites actually weren't anti-technology, we're fighting for social justice. But the point is, neither of us are against the idea of innovation. But the truth is, in the hands of a few billionaires, the priority has been to eliminate jobs, extract profits, and addict us to outrageous content that turns us from citizens to combatants. Now, I am not an AI accelerationist, and I'm not an AI doomer. I'm an AI democratist. So today I want to lay out 7 principles for what a democratic AI looks like. This vision is a part of a broader call for patriotic renewal, to have shared prosperity in our nation, not oligarchic capture and dominance. A vision for a new economic patriotism where we have a thriving working and middle class with good jobs in rural communities, factory towns, suburban neighborhoods, and our urban centers. Here's what it means, in my view, for AI in America. First, we must keep human beings in the loop. We need real protections against mass displacement, beginning with our 3.5 million truck drivers. Even as self-driving trucks improve safety and efficiency, human drivers must remain, just like pilots must still fly on our planes. How many folks here would get on a plane without a pilot? I mean, the idea, the way people casually talk about getting rid of truck drivers is mind-boggling. We have 4 million jobs at stake. What we need is an AI that augments human capability instead of eliminating jobs. Second, every large company must bargain with its workers. Unions or elected representatives should ensure workers move into new high-value jobs or can share in AI's productivity gains through higher wages, profit sharing, and shorter work weeks. And the senator alluded to this. Okay, they say AI is getting more productive, but then do the workers get the shorter work week? Do the workers get a higher salary? Do the workers get the bonuses? Or is all the money of AI's productivity just going to the shareholder and capital class? We need to make sure workers are actually benefiting from the increased productivity that they are providing. Third, we need to fix the tax code's anti-human bias. The reality is that you get accelerated depreciation when you use technology, but human beings come with a tax. Nobel laureate Doreen Acemoglu estimates that companies pay 0 tax when they have digital tools, AI agents, or automation in their companies, but pay almost 30% in taxes between employers and employees when they hire workers. This makes no sense. We need to make it easier to hire human beings instead of AI agents. We also need to create an annual data dividend so every American gets a check from the data they generate for both the private sector and our government activities like public health, traffic management, and policy research. But it should be coupled with a data bill of rights so you don't have companies like Palantir taking our data and giving it to ICE to be harassing and detaining immigrants and citizens. Fourth, we must launch a future workforce administration. Look, we should seize this moment of anxiety among white-collar and blue-collar families and answer it with the boldest, most patriotic jobs agenda we've seen in generations, funded by a modest wealth tax on trillions created here. I hear I'm being protested outside because I've said that billionaires need to be taxed more. The self-awareness of some of these billionaires, they did this billionaire march against these taxes. I said, at least have economists or something make your case. Anyway, funded by a modest wealth tax on trillions created here and by a token tax on AI used by businesses that could displace labor, this program can put millions of Americans to work in public service. The initiative will drive moonshot projects that expand the frontiers in science, clean energy, and biotechnology. It will hire and mobilize young people to rebuild towns, teach our children, provide childcare and elder care, counseling for mental health, and strengthen small business in every community. And we will launch 1,000 new trade schools and tech institutes so the next generation are prepared for careers that AI cannot replace. Fifth, data centers must serve the communities who power them. Right now, data centers are one-way extraction centers from communities to the wealthiest corporations. And we saw one of them actually get stopped in New Jersey just a couple nights ago. Tech companies need to provide local companies with compute resources for schools and libraries, create local jobs and fund startups, and use renewable energy and dry cooling technology. We should look to what Singapore has done. My friend John Nichols, who's with us, says Finland, what they've done in terms of a solution that actually holds these tech companies accountable for having clean energy and a massive supply of clean energy. Most importantly, tech companies must pay the full electricity bill instead of shifting costs onto the communities where they're building the data centers. Two more principles, and then I'll wrap up. Sixth, we must prevent AI from weaponizing our public discourse. We can unite across party lines to stop engagement-driven algorithms from spreading hate, end Section 230 protection from amplified violent content, and require platforms to open up so Americans can connect freely across these platforms. Finally, seventh, we must regulate AI so it's used to improve humanity and not damage it. We need clear, enforceable guardrails and mandatory third-party verification of advanced AI models so this powerful technology does not cause serious societal harm. It can't just be voluntary, which is what it is right now at the Center for AI Standards and Innovation at NIST, at Commerce. They literally ask these tech companies, do you agree? That's not how we do regulation. Regulation is what the democratic will is. We need a robust federal agency to regulate AI like we regulate nuclear energy or federal aviation. I actually had a Stanford professor who was saying once, his student was complaining about regulations. He said, well, the one time I'm glad about regulation is when I go on an airplane. You know, regulations make us safer. There's so many of them that we take for granted. These principles are the beginning of a framework to ensure that AI does not usher in a level of wealth and power concentration that further rips our democracy apart. If we continue with the status quo or adopt poll-tested incrementalism, we will leave ordinary Americans out in the cold, and modern prosperity will only be for the privileged, only in districts like mine. I will not sit by and watch that happen. We need a program with the boldness and scale of the New Deal, a democratic project for our time, not to slow innovation, but to ensure its benefits reach every American. A program that by its very substance says there will be no surrender to the tech lords, none. Only a reclaiming of AI for the American people. And so, particularly to the Stanford students, to emerging technology and business leaders, my challenge is simple. The future must not be written by AI agents that serve San Francisco billionaires. Like at any other pivotal moment in American history, it must be written by all of us, together, in a way that binds or divides and gives us a new national purpose of economic renewal and independence for every American in every place of our nation. Thank you, and now look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you, Senator Sanders and Congressman Khanna. My name is Diya TV, and I am a member of the Stanford Speakers Bureau. In a moment, we'll begin the Q&A portion of today's town hall. To ensure that we can hear from as many of you as possible in the time that we have remaining, we ask that you follow these ground rules. Please limit yourself to a single direct question of less than 1 minute. We ask that you avoid multi-part questions or follow-ups so we can move through the queue. Please be brief. We want to maximize the time our guests have to provide thoughtful answers. And while we would love to hear from everyone, please understand we may not be able to reach everybody in the time we have today. We appreciate your cooperation in making today's event a success. There are 2 mic lines located on both aisles of the first floor, and we will be answering questions between them in an alternating fashion. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please approach one of the mic lines in an orderly fashion. All right, let's get started. Let's start with stage left when you guys are ready.
Thank you so much to Representative Khanna and Senator Sanders for coming to speak today. I think we're all very happy to have you here and really appreciate it. Given the current state of our immigration system, with everything going on with ICE and the general systemic issues we have with immigration, how do we balance the amazing benefits that come from diversity in our immigration system, in our country, and our workforce, with the need to have a properly functioning legal method for immigration? And with the flaws that still exist within the realm of artificial intelligence, is it really feasible to use AI to maybe help with this process? Thank you.
So this is personal for me. My parents are immigrants from, to this day, and the senator's been on many Codels. When I go on a Codel, even when we're going on an Air Force plane, my mom calls me and says, "Don't lose your passport." And I say, "Mom, they have the passport. It'll be fine." But I understand the fear. And now I go around the country, and people come up to me, born in the United States, and they say, "Congressman, here's my passport. I'm carrying it around." It is so offensive what ICE is doing around America. We need to tear down the agency and replace it. The reality is that we had an immigration service, INS, from the New Deal up to George W. Bush. Now we can look at how to have better intelligence sharing so you don't have 9/11, but you cannot have an agency that has no oversight and that has no sense of democratic accountability.
Let me agree with everything that Ro just said, but say this. I was proud to have introduced an amendment, which ended up getting the support of all the Democrats and a couple of Republicans, which essentially did away with all of the new funding that ICE received. Second of all, I want you all to understand that what Trump is doing on immigration is part of a bigger picture and a movement toward authoritarianism. What demagogues, Trump didn't invent this playbook. Demagogues have always used it. Our country faces, as all of you know, we've touched on some of them, enormous problems, right? Healthcare, climate, education, income and wealth inequality. Serious people sit down and they say, okay, how are we going to address these issues? You know what demagogues do? They pick a powerless minority. In the 30s in Germany, it was the Jews, it was gypsies. Historically in America, it was black people, it was Latinos, it was gay people, okay? And now the scapegoat is the undocumented. You can't afford housing, not the greed of landlords. You can't afford health care, not the greed of the insurance companies or the drug companies. It's the undocumented. They are the scapegoat. So we have got to turn that around, and I will tell you, having met with some of the people in Minneapolis who have fought back in a just extraordinarily brave way. What we need, instead of scapegoating people, I can tell you that in my state, we have undocumented people who are keeping our dairy farmers alive. You have undocumented people during COVID. Who do you think was working in meatpacking plants, at nursing homes, at child care centers, who died on the job? So instead of scapegoating and terrorizing communities, we need something that has long been not dealt with by Congress, and that is comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm a first generation student, low income student here at Stanford University. I'm also first generation. My question to you is, how can everyday Americans work to fight against AI taking over human labor?
I think it's part of a broader question of how we fight against oligarchy and authoritarianism. And it means that we've got to go outside of our zone of comfort, and we've got to be involved in the political process. I have been all over this country as part of a fighting oligarchy tour, and Roe was with me in some of them. We've spoken to hundreds of thousands of people, okay? The people in America do not want a handful of billionaires to control our economy. They do not want Trump and his friends to move us toward an authoritarian society. But these guys have a lot of wealth, they got a lot of power, and they're working really hard. What you have got to do is organize at the grassroots level. That's what took place in Minneapolis. That's what's taking place all over the country. That's why 7 million people came out at a No Kings rally. So, in any way that you feel makes sense to you, I beg of you, future of democracy in this country rests in your hands. Get involved in the political process. One word, just so you feel optimistic. Ro mentioned this. Good friend of mine, Zohran Mamdani. All right. Zohran began his campaign for mayor of the largest city in America at 1% of the polls. Nobody knew who he was. But what he did is organize over 90,000 people in New York to knock on doors to get involved, and he won a strong victory. He did it in New York. We can do it all over this country.
My name is Marcelina Maciąg. I'm 19 years old and I come from Poland, a world's 20th largest economy and NATO's key country for Eastern flank. From the time I was a little girl, I always dreamed of becoming the first female president of Poland. And today I have 16 years to prepare. If you were in my shoes, what 3 advices would you give me on how to lead, and not on winning the elections, but how to lead with integrity and how to provide real impact in
I'll defer to the person who's run for president twice.
Also, Rose Ro is not the only son of an immigrant here. My dad came from Poland, near Krakow, at the age of 17. And I don't want to wax romantic, but I think what Ro is saying and what I'm saying, my dad came to this country without a nickel in his pocket, and he could not speak English. And he fled anti-Semitism, and he fled extreme poverty. And the idea that his kids would ever have a college education, his two boys, was something unimaginable. And that's the best of what our country is about. My wife's family is the same. They came from Ireland. Many of your families came from all over the world. That's who we are as a people. But to answer your question, you got to start off at the level of understanding. Don't start thinking, I want to be president of Poland. Start off by thinking, what are the needs of the people? And work with people. What's going on in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of economy, in terms of the health and strength of your democracy. And work with people who are fighting for values that you believe in. And when you organize at the grassroots level around those issues, the rest takes place. But start off with the basics. What do you believe in? How do you work with the best people in your country? And the rest will take place organically.
Yeah, again, thank you guys for being here today, Senator and Congressperson. And my question is, I guess, for both of you, but specifically Senator Sanders. I'm from a low-income first-gen student as well, from rural West Virginia and from Appalachia, which you're quite familiar. You recently were talking to my people at tables and trying to hear them out and understand their experience in the world as low-income, hardworking Americans and kind of the rural working class. And so my question to you from like Appalachian and for my people, is that recently in West Virginia, a bill passed, House Bill 2014, which was essentially allowing the aggressive incoming of quote high impact data centers into rural America, into West Virginia communities, because most of our communities are depressed coal towns, and so we really don't have an economy. The narrative in my state is that our economy will then be replaced by these quote AI data centers. And my question to you is, like, do you really think that these new data centers will really be the source that will resurrect the economies of rural America? Or do you think that working class Americans like my people will actually be lifted out of poverty from this to revive these depressed coal towns? Or are my people being once again tricked by the wealthiest Americans and by the right in Congress and in the West Virginia broadly? Are they misunderstanding these data centers and their roles? And if you're in opposition to these arguments, what are the pathways and messaging into letting my people and my community know the realities and the effects on their everyday lives?
Wow. All right, two things. I think the evidence is pretty clear. Data centers create a good number of construction jobs. It takes a lot of work to build these data centers, and workers do that work, and it creates those jobs. The evidence is also pretty clear that once the data centers are up, the number of jobs are fairly minimal, okay? And then depending on the location, in some areas actually, some companies actually want subsidies from the local community to come in. There are, in many instances, increase in electric rates, pressure on water systems, etc. West Virginia, I've been to West Virginia many times. Yeah. And I went to the community, to Mingo County. You know what Mingo County is? All right. And this was a county that voted overwhelmingly for Trump. Trump won West Virginia by about 70%, Mingo County by 74%. And I deliberately went into the county where Trump did the best, because I wanted to talk to the very decent and good people in your state. And what I found in a state that went overwhelmingly for Trump is they did by and large because there was no alternative, no political alternative. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this one. But one of the issues that we have got to understand where we are politically in America is, in my view, most working class people are not racists, they're not sexist, they're not homophobes. Most working people are desperate, They have looked at the Democratic Party for a long time. They've listened to the rhetoric, and still they can't afford health care, can't afford to send their kids to college, can't afford groceries or housing. And in desperation, they say, oh, to hell with that. I'll roll the dice. I'll go with Trump. And that is certainly the case in West Virginia, where the Democratic Party virtually does not exist. So my hope is if you're going back to your home state, they are in desperate need of good leadership, help build a political movement which will represent the great working people of West Virginia, make sure that we have a moratorium on data centers in general, and help build a political party there that can represent your constituents.
I would just echo that. I love how you talk about your love for your people. And I would say when you're done with Stanford, you're going to get tons of offers from the Bay Area and New York. Go back to your hometown. Go back to West Virginia if you can and get involved in politics. I think you'll make a big difference. On the substance of it, the reality is, I talked about the $18 trillion in my district. We have a lot of data centers. That's not how we built the wealth. It is being lazy for political figures to say, oh, I brought in a data center, now we're going to create new jobs here. We need a far more comprehensive approach. I've called for a Marshall Plan for America, advanced investment in manufacturing, in childcare, in elder care, in tech centers, in trade schools, to actually have economic development, not just say, okay, we're going to get a data center and somehow create good paying jobs in communities like West Virginia.
Howdy, Senator, Congressman. My name is Roy O'Dwyer, and I've been elected leadership for the Stanford Graduate Workers Union for about 3 years. I helped write our contract with Carl Rosen, UE's general president, and from my conversations with him and just the total environment I've seen in the labor movement, there's a feeling amongst labor that the Democratic Party and the labor union movement have not been on the same page for a while. Some of the examples that I am familiar with is that the current Democratic governor of California is actively campaigning against the billionaire tax. And you've got the Teamsters Union that was not supporting Kamala Harris during her presidential run, and a couple other unions, when they polled their internal people, actively going onto the side of Trump, but they refused then to endorse a person. How do you plan to align the labor movement with the Democratic Party when they seem to be so orthogonally aligned at the moment?
Thank you for putting me in a position where you think I single-handedly could do all that. All right, this is what I do believe, and I speak as the former chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. We are not going to grow the middle class. We're not going to create an economy that works for all rather than the few unless we have a strong labor movement. And you're a member in the UE. You remember the UE? That's one of the great progressive unions in this country. And I thank you. I spoke at the UE convention in Chicago just a few months ago. And what I loved about that convention, and I love about the UE, and it's true with UAW and other of the unions as well, is you saw a merger of blue-collar factory workers with graduate students as well. I love that white-collar, blue-collar mix. People are learning from each other. You're learning from the blue-collar guys. They're learning from you. All right, bottom line is, like many other institutions in America today, some union leadership has come very far removed from the needs of its own people. So I think workers are all over this country, and I would say right now, am I proud or am I pleased with the role the unions are standing up in terms of standing up to Trump? I am not. All right, so we need a revitalization, not only of the Democratic Party, to make that a grassroots party. We also need to revive and revitalize the trade union movement in this country to get working people involved. So not only do they get good contracts and working conditions and benefits, but that they help lead a mass movement in this country, which, bottom line, can create a good, decent standard of living for every man, woman, and child. One point I want to make, and I should have made it earlier. You are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. You all know that? We're not a poor country. There is no excuse, and the unions got to lean on this thing, why every American does not have health care as a human right. There is no reason why, at the least, public colleges and universities are tuition free. We need the best educated workforce in the world. It is insane that many of you are going to be leaving the school deeply in debt, right? All right, that doesn't make a lot of sense when we desperately need you to become doctors and nurses and professionals of all kinds. So revitalization of the trade union movement from the bottom on up is very important. Play a role in that, all right?
It's no longer a theoretical question. Senator Sanders has shown us what the platform needs to be to win back working class voters and labor. And I'm tired of a Democratic Party, every time we lose, they have some kind of autopsy as if it's a messaging issue, as if we need just better words, as if we need more charisma. Well, courage is the new charisma. What we need is actual policies that are going to stand with the working class. That means taxing billionaires. It means being for Medicare for all. It means $10 a day childcare. It means being for a living wage. It means opposing overseas wars. It means opposing a bloated defense budget. If we have the conviction of standing for these policies, people will respond to it. Instead, we don't want to offend the corporate interests, the money. So we think if we just say it in a slightly more clever way, in a more charismatic way, somehow we're going to succeed. Voters are smarter than that. And certainly the working class voters are smarter than that.
Senator Sanders, Congressman Khanna, thank you for this event. In an era where in the AI era, where college education is so expensive, how can you justify a system where my friend Jay, an international student who has lived in California for over 4 years, is forced to pay over $80,000 for out-of-state tuition, while undocumented students qualify for subsidized education through the California DREAM Act?
I think that's the false, in my opinion, the false choice. Yes, your friend shouldn't have to pay $80,000, but we can have free public college in this country if we just had a tax on the Wall Street financial speculation. I mean, the reality is, the problem, it's about $80 billion to have free public college for everyone in America. That is 10% of the defense budget. So instead of, in my opinion, I appreciate your question because I don't want to push back on you, but instead of blaming the undocumented kid for the $80,000, how about blaming the defense contractors? How about blaming the billionaires who are not paying enough taxes? How about blaming an economic system that has not invested in the health and the education of our country?
I thank you for asking the question, and I know you probably perceive you're in a minority position here, and it's brave to do it, and I appreciate you doing it. But Rose's point is exactly the right point. Your friend should not have to pay. Nobody in America. We need you guys to go out. You need to be the best educated folks in the world. We desperately need you. All right, that's this country needs you. We need more doctors. We need more architects. We need more professionals. We need you to help us transform this country. I want you to get the best education. And if you come from a working class background like I did, okay, it's absurd that you have to go deep. Are you going to go deeply in debt after graduating school? That's crazy. All right, but do you understand what Ro was saying? You are living in the richest country in the history of the world. 2 years ago, Donald Trump gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. And then we cut back on education. Does that make sense to you, honestly?
Are you talking about the 2017?
I'm talking about the big, beautiful bill. In other words, what Roe is saying is we are a wealthy nation. We can guarantee quality education to all people regardless of income. Okay? Period. Okay. You're a brave guy. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thank you, Senator Sanders and Congressman Khanna. My name is Angela Wynn, and I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. I study computer science, and I lead Stanford's only technology ethics student org for undergraduates. Thank you. Thanks. I believe that many of us are concerned about a bigger issue of mission creep in the coming years with data center investments. On the topic of defense, we know tech has become a tool of dehumanization, enabling police, ICE, and military to escalate their control and repression of civilians here and beyond. Only possible with the approval of DoD budget increases and big tech or defense contracts that are supposedly made in the name of national security, safety, and global competition. Military cloud infrastructure, AI systems, and surveillance platforms used against civilians, and surveillance systems like Flock Safety and Amazon Ring are increasingly concerning Americans. Additionally, people's TSA privileges and visas being revoked due to both ICE agents with facial recognition apps at protests and DHS requesting user data from Google and Meta for social media post monitoring is showing a bigger issue. So my question is, what will you both do to prevent the unnecessary increase of DoD funding and big tech contracts, along with be proactive to ensure that these billions of dollars in investments for data centers are not later used to largely store civilian data and surveillance footage?
You raise a couple of very important issues. One Roe touched on. It is not widely known, but we are spending now, what is it, about $1 trillion a year on defense? $1 trillion a year. And by the way, there are some geniuses now want to increase that by 50%, right? Okay, another 500 billion, okay? While 800,000 people sleep out on the street and close to 100 million people have no health care. So the first thing we need to do is take a hard look at the defense budget. And by the way, the Defense Department is the only major government agency that has never successfully undergone an independent audit. So nobody denies massive waste and fraud. They don't even know what they own, all right? It's a huge, sprawling bureaucracy. So we can maintain a strong defense and significantly cut military spending. Second of all, the issue you raise is on a lot of people's minds. And it's not just through the DoD. I think people are now perceiving and fearing that every phone call that they make, every email that they send, every text that they send, somebody is going to get a hold of that. So we need to stand up as a nation and say that privacy is in fact a human right. We don't need Palantir and other large corporations knowing every damn thing about us and every phone call that we made. And certainly you're right about this facial recognition where, you know, people who are protesting are now, you know, getting photographed in ways that will impact their lives. So privacy, huge issue. We can cut military spending significantly, invest in the needs of the American people.
You're absolutely right about the defense budget. I mean, it's 56% of the entire discretionary budget of the federal government. From the time I've been in Congress, it's gone up from 600 billion to almost $1 trillion, and Trump wants to take it to 1.5 trillion. Now, I've been on the Armed Services Committee, and I'm often the lone vote against the budget. In fact, if you watch one of these clips, they all chant, Khanna, 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 and then when I don't vote yes and I vote no, you get boo from the entire Armed Services panel. But we need a new generation because they're wrapped in still the Cold War philosophy that, by the way, isn't paying our troops who should be paid. It's going to defense contractors who are making exorbitant profits in these defense executives. The second point in your question, which is so important, is we need our tech companies to show some backbone in not complying with administrative subpoenas from Department of Homeland Security. They're under no obligation to
comply with an administrative subpoena, which is not a judicial subpoena, and they're getting administrative subpoenas to basically monitor social media accounts that are criticizing ICE. For all the people in Silicon Valley who are lecturing about the First Amendment, this would be a good time to stand up for the First Amendment. Stop complying with those administrative subpoenas.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to close out the night.
Despite similar levels of education and development, Europe has produced almost none of the world's largest frontier tech firms, while the United States dominates global tech innovation. I want to ask, what institutional or economic features do you think explain this difference? Earlier, Congressman Khanna said that government dollars led to AI. Why haven't European government dollars led to such innovation? Are our congressmen like y'all so much smarter investors than them? Or is it that our entrepreneurs face a better set of incentives at the margin than them? In short, I'm asking you to explain not why we have inequality, but why we've had so much growth over the last 2 decades.
Because we are very smart people who have been incentivized, who have worked very hard. But you know what? In most European countries, all people have health care as a human right. In most European countries, it doesn't cost $80,000 a year to go to college. In most European countries, they have strong child care systems. So the point is, I understand the argument. If we don't have any regulation and you give tax breaks to these large companies, they will create these technologies. But what the point of this evening, this afternoon, is to say that while these technologies can be very useful, they will not be useful unless we have a degree of control over what these guys are doing. So it's not just technology for the sake of technology. It's technology to improve human life. All right? Please.
What has led, why do we grow to begin with? What has led to our growth? Yes, we don't, you can say we don't provide for the poor as much as we should, but what has led to this level of richness?
But it's not a question of the poor. All right, you're right. We got 800,000 people who are homeless. 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So what Ro is saying and what I am saying, we're not against AI and we're not against robotics. But we want those technologies to improve life for all people and not just make the very wealthiest people in this country even wealthier.
I agree with everything Senator Sanders said, and I'll answer your question as well. But not only is it a moral issue, what Senator Sanders talks about, Gary Becker was a conservative economist and won the Nobel Prize at University of Chicago, said in an AI economy, in a digital economy, when he was writing, he's now passed, the single 2 biggest investments you can make are in the health and the education of your people. So it was also not just a moral issue, it's an issue of our economic productivity and growth. The issue you asked, though, why did we go ahead and not Europe? There are a number of reasons. First of all, in Europe, high school was the domain of the elite. Thomas Piketty writes about this. In 1950s, Americans had 80% high school education. In Europe, it was 30 or 40%. What should that tell us? We should be investing in higher education in this country as opposed to reversing those trends. Second, America invested in our research universities with Vannevar Bush, and we made massive investments after World War II. They're eliminating that. Third, America had a policy of welcoming people from around the world and had immigrants that built our economic growth. Now, I don't discount that we've had an entrepreneurial culture and there are good parts of that entrepreneurial culture. But you know, one of the things that upsets me or frustrates me, and I'll meet this founder and he's worked really hard or she's worked really hard. They've taken risk and they say, I'm self-made. I'm self-made. I didn't have anything. And I said, well, I don't think I'm self-made. My grandfather was in jail for 4 years under colonialism. It'd be hard for me to think I'm self-made. You had health care.
You had child care or didn't have to worry about it. When I had to go to get a doctor, I got to see my doctor. You had parents who encouraged you. So yeah, okay, you weren't Donald Trump. You didn't start out with $100 million, but have the humility to understand what you were given by this country in terms of your start. That is all, in a nutshell, the entire agenda, in my view, of Senator Sanders, why I supported him when he ran, the entire agenda is simply to say every person should have the chance that I had as a son of immigrants in America. It's not a very radical demand. And that you can still have the entrepreneurship and you can still have America keep all of that while investing in every person in this nation.